Hello guys, today's topic of the video is gonna be gearing. US tier 10 Tech Tree Destroyer. I'm gonna show you my preferred playstyle for that ship, but also give you some alternatives that you can use based on your personal preferences. First, let's talk about US destroyers in general. The tech tree progression for US DDs looks kinda okay. However, the power level between your guns and torpedoes shifts quite a lot when progressing towards higher tiers. At lower tiers such as tier 6 and 7, you're gonna notice that your torpedoes have very bad range and do not really exceed your concealment, meaning that you cannot really use them stealth. However, your guns on that tiers are really powerful compared to other DDs you probably will be seeing around, meaning that you're very effective at fighting them, especially on close range. Around tier 8, gonna get the best balance between torpedoes and guns, since you still are not that power crept compared to other nations, while your torpedoes actually start getting some decent range. But the closer you get to tier 10, the more you start to notice that your guns are not that reliable at killing enemies anymore, while your torpedoes, however, get extremely long range. On gearing, they exceed 15 kilometers that Haaland has, going up to 16.5, being outranged exclusively by 20 kilometer Japanese torpedoes. But in contrast to them, they also are extremely stealthy, just like your higher tier DD is as well. Gearing having average concealment of like 5.9 is kinda great. US destroyers are also known for having one improved thing, which is the American smokescreen. And this is what my playstyle of gearing is gonna be focused around. Beside American upgraded smokescreen, semi-decent guns, and long-range stealthy torpedoes, gearing doesn't really possess something that makes it unique among other destroyers. Your AA, concealment, and durability is pretty average, with your speed being actually kinda below average. So to pull as much value as you need to win, I adapted to making it a more of supporting your team kind of playstyle. And I know that supporting your teammates in World of Warships is not really the greatest idea. However, gearing can do it without them even realizing that you're doing it. And here's my build for gearing. I use the standard torpedo boat build with small twist that I use superintendent to get extra smoke screen that I can leave for my allies. However, you absolutely don't need that perk, this is my personal preference. If you want something else in that spot, I highly suggest the 3-point perk that reduces your main battery reload time, since your guns are actually fairly okay in terms of dealing with other destroyers, especially on close range. My playstyle for gearing revolves around 3 major principles. First is spotting. Basically, I'm the team's private investigator. I find enemies, I track them down, and then my team ignores them anyway. But in general, you want to be as close to enemies as possible without being detected. That will also help you with the second principle, which is torpedoing. Utilizing 16.5 kilometer torpedoes that are extremely stealthy for them to zone out enemies is very good. On top of that, they are on ridiculously low cooldown if you spec into it, about 70 seconds, which means that by the time they reach the maximum range, you probably are able to fire another drop. They are great at making sure that nobody comes close to your allies and to kill off battleships who think that evasive maneuvering is just a suggestion, which basically translates to obvious straight lineness. The last principle is not using your smokescreens for yourself, using them to cover your allies. How to do this correctly is that you need to actually know a little bit more about the game and see what kind of ships your allies have on the flank. For example, smoking up radar cruisers like Des Moines is very good, Smoking up secondary pushing battleships to allow them to push is also a good idea. But what if you don't have those kind of ships on the flank? Well, smoking up allies is still very good, but you don't really need to smoke them directly. All you need to do is smoke in such a way that enemy's line of sight to your allies is cut. Therefore, they're gonna go dark the moment they stop firing, regardless if the enemy destroyer is close or not. This can save up a lot of HP and trouble to your allies that they probably won't even notice you doing. A very important feature of that is also that after you lay down your smoke screen, you are supposed to be in front of that smoke screen so that you spot the enemies for your allies, which is kinda ironic since playing randoms is basically throwing up the concept of teams. And you can see that sometimes when no matter how hard you try, well, your allies still prefer to die. Your role as a support destroyer is not only zoning enemies with torpedoes, setting up smoke screens and spotting. It's also making sure that nobody gets close to your allies, such for example submarines. Gearing is not really the greatest at hunting them down, but since you're playing so close to your team, you shouldn't be scared of engaging into a fight with enemy submarine, since enemies are relatively further away and are not gonna be able to support enemy sub with enough firepower to kill you. Same goes for engaging enemy destroyers that get very close. You're actually kind of good in terms of firepower to deal with most of the torpedo boats and some of the hybrids. However, with gunboats such for example Kleber, you're gonna struggle, especially if you want to engage them on longer distances. Your main battery shells are extremely floaty on those ranges, making it very difficult for you to actually hit stuff with it. In terms of correctly placing your torpedoes, you don't really need to stack your torpedoes. They are extremely effective at dealing damage, so I suggest you using the standard strategy for Wall of Skill. Combining that with relatively low cooldown on your torpedoes makes it so that you're not really punished for making some mistakes in terms of aiming. In terms of do's and don'ts for gearing, first, you're a support destroyer. You cannot support your team if you're dead, so do not play too aggressively, but also do not go for too passive approach. You need to find a middle space. Usually it is played like a towboat, but make sure that you always get an escape route that for example can be your smoked up cruiser. You can bait enemy DD to engage to you, you're gonna trade some of your HP, but the enemy DD is probably gonna die because he's not gonna be able to withstand, well, smoked up cruiser fire or a secondary battleship. Your torpedoes have long range on gearing, but that doesn't mean that you need to stay on maximum of it to actually hit enemies. Adjust the range from which you're firing your torpedoes based on enemies' radar range, enemy DDs that are present. Like if you outspot enemy DDs significantly, you can get much closer. If they don't have radars, you can also get much closer. But if they do have, you need to play from outside of it to make sure that you're not gonna die. Last don't is, don't force yourself to be just your team's personal assistant. Don't force the support playstyle. Just think about if you can use it to pull some value. If you can't, because for example, all your cruisers are like Hindenburg or Zao that are already far away kiting, and your battleships are not really gonna push, and the enemy also is not gonna be trying to make any kind of moves on your flank. Save the stuff for later, or sometimes that later may never came, because enemy team will just perish. Point is, play for yourself from time to time. You don't necessarily need to force yourself to be the support. It's just good to be one. It's extremely nice when it's pulled off, but you don't need to pull it at the start of every single game. And that will kinda be it. This ship is not really that complicated to play. But if you're gonna have some questions, I'm happy to answer them in the comment section as always. If you like this kind of content and you want more, consider liking this video and subscribing. If you didn't enjoy it, well, you're lucky because my torpedoes are currently on cooldown. It's been Senpai Silent. See you next time.